Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. I am back with another true crime video, and today we are going to be doing the story of Rosemary Nomia Ndlovu. If you are new to this channel, I try and do these videos often, so please do check out the playlist. I've done a couple already and I will be doing more in the near future. Now with that said, and without wasting any more time, let's dive into today's video. Today's video takes us to New Forest Village in Bushbuck Ridge in Mpumalanga, and subsequently we will end up in Johannesburg, South Africa. Rosemary Nomia Ndlovu was born in the year 1975 in Bushbuck Ridge to mother Maria Mushwana and father Maxwell Ndlovu. She's one of three girls. She had an older sister named Audrey Ndlovu and a younger sister named Nomasonto Ndlovu. Now, although they did not have much growing up, one could go as far as saying they were extremely poor, but the family was full of love and the parents did all that they could to provide for the kids. Unfortunately, things got worse for the family when Rosemary's father passed away when they were still in their formative years. He wasn't in any burial societies and therefore they didn't have enough money for him to be buried and they had to borrow it. This probably put on a switch on young Rosemary and instilled the importance of some sort of life insurance. Nonetheless, the family buried the father and Rosemary's mother took on the responsibility of being the sole breadwinner. She took on this role with stride and honor and worked really hard in farms and factories to make sure that her children got an education. Rosemary became the first to complete her high school education, and because there was not enough money to further her education in a high institution of learning, she opted to go into the police force. As much as the decision was mainly due to financial limitations, but Rosemary was pretty fond of the idea of being a police officer. Growing up, she was known for being somewhat of a tomboy, and everyone else was also not surprised. Moreover, getting into the police academy was a huge achievement in this community because very few people had any sort of an education. So off Rosemary went to Johannesburg, also known as the City of Gold. When she arrived, she enrolled at a police academy and completed the course in training and was eventually sworn in as a police officer. This is when she went under oath and promised to serve and protect all South Africans against all crimes and injustices, and also act honestly and responsibly in all situations, while performing all her duties with noble motives and set examples for communities that she serves. Life was on the up and up for Rosemary. She was officially a police officer and her family was extremely proud of her. She was stationed at the Tembisa police station and she also found residents in the area. Because Rosemary was fairly new to the City of Gold, she started exploring Johannesburg. And this is when she actually picked up the gambling habit. She fell in love with the idea of winning money and became a frequent visitor at the Emperor's Palace in Campton Park. The year now is 2011. Rosemary met a young man named Morris Mabasa and they immediately fell in love. Morris had young children from a previous relationship and loved his family so much. His family would later describe him as someone who was very loving, caring, and more than anything else, a provider. Morris Mabasa worked for the American Embassy. Similar to Rosemary Ndlovu, he was also coming from an impoverished background, but had worked himself out of that environment. But even though he was out, the majority of his family still lived in those conditions, which is why he took great pride in the fact that his salary was spent on his family. This, however, was the fundamental difference between Rosemary and Morris, because even though Rosemary had left the family in poverty, she was not one to send money back at home. And as a result of all of this situation became a thorn in their relationship because for the life of her, Rosemary just could not understand why Morris had to send the bulk majority of his money back at home, even though he had left kids. She constantly told Morris to reduce the amount of money he was sending back at home, while she was using the bulk of her salary and all of her other money on gambling. The gambling was starting to cause problems for Rosemary because all of her money was going into the habit, to the extent of which she started visiting loan sharks to try and maintain it. This is when it is believed she started thinking of alternative ways to make money. She came up with what she thought was a bright idea to start claiming money from life insurances. Now, in order for her to do this, she had to open life insurance policies, and moreover, those people that are insured in those policies would unfortunately have to pass away. This is when she called her mother's sister Lucy. Lucy is essentially her aunt. Lucy had two children, and one of which was witness Madala Homu. Rosemary called the aunt and said, Auntie Lucy, Konje, when is your birthday? Because I want to bring you a cake. And the aunt responded with the date. And Rosemary then said, definitely 100% on the day of the birthday, I'll drive down to Bookbuck Ridge and I'll bring you a birthday cake. The day of the birthday arrived, and true to her word, Rosemary drove 5 hours to Bushbuck Ridge with the cake. And when she arrived, the aunt was extremely happy to see her, and the family was very grateful for what she had done. Rosemary was their pride and joy, and the fact that she was a police officer and she was driving a car made them respect her even more, because where they were living, these things were far-fetched. Rosemary and the aunt sat in the sitting area of the house and chatted away until the conversation got to witness Madala Homo. Rosemary expressed that she was worried about Homo's lifestyle because he was always going out. And as a police officer, she had noticed how these things normally end up. If men are going out at night, they can get into trouble or get themselves into bad situations and actually end up passing away. She then went on to say that I highly recommend that you put Homo into a burial society. And the aunt agreed because, one, this is a police officer telling her this, and she respects Rosemary so much. But the only problem was that she said, I'm only earning 120 rands. Rosemary said, you do not have to worry about it. I'll take care of it. All you have to do is give me Homo's credentials and I'll sort everything out in Johannesburg. And that was that. The whole reason for that visit was sorted. Rosemary got back into her car and drove back to Johannesburg. Immediately when she got to Johannesburg, she went to insure Homo. But instead of putting Homo's mother as the main beneficiary, she then decided to put herself. As if that is not enough, she went one step further, and instead of saying that she is Homo's cousin, she said that Homo and her are married. And from this point onwards, she made sure to pay all the insurance premiums religiously, making sure to never miss a single payment. And in March of 2012, less than a year after she had put him into a life policy, witness Madala Homo went missing after returning back from work. At this point, Witness was not staying at home with his family, so it took the family a few days to realize that he was actually missing. And when they did realize, they immediately called Rosemary, because she's a police woman, so that she could assist with finding out where Witness was, and she was happy to try and do that. And immediately, Rosemary got into the mission of trying to find Homo, and in no time, she had found him. Unfortunately, he was no more, as he was found already in a field in Bushbuck Ridge with a head injury. It would later be proved in court that it was either Rosemary had done this to Homo herself or had paid people to do it. Unfortunately, at the time that it was happening back in 2012, nothing was really done in terms of investigating the case, which says Madala Homi was just laid to rest and life unfortunately just went on. Now, as much as Rosemary had promised her aunt to actually insure her son and pay the premiums, when it was time to pay up, she was nowhere to be found. She didn't even attend the funeral, and all that she did was actually send a 200 rand note as contribution. Meanwhile, back in Johannesburg, she went directly to the insurers and claimed 131,000, which she immediately started spending. Rosemary was back at Emperor's Palace and had paid off all her loans from the loan sharks, and she was on top of her game. She was such a frequent visitor at the casino that on one occasion, she actually went as far as winning a car. Now, this for Rosemary fueled the fire, because one, it made her believe that actually, I should actually come here more and more often, because you literally get your money back. And unfortunately for her, by 2013, a little less than a year after Homo had passed away, she was back at square one with no money and in debt. And this is when she actually decided that she needed to go on round 2 of claiming for insurances. And this time, the person that she chose was her older sister, Audrey Nomia Ndlovu. Audrey was the firstborn in her family and had also relocated to Johannesburg. Now, they didn't stay too far away from each other, but they had not seen each other since she had moved to Johannesburg. Audrey was a mother. She had a son named Brilliant Mashego. Unfortunately, unlike Rosemary, she had not made it into the police academy, and instead she was working as a security guard and getting paid 2,700 rand a month. Although she had been in Johannesburg for a little while now at this point, Rosemary had not been to visit her. So she was pleasantly surprised when Rosemary gave her a call and said that I'm coming over to see you. Rosemary arrived driving her car, and her sister was outside chatting away with her neighbors, and she was very happy to introduce her police officer sister to her neighbors. Rosemary greeted, but very quickly prompted Audrey that they should go inside and have some tea. When they arrived inside, Rosemary insisted that the sister must relax and she will prepare the tea. As she was making the tea, she then realized that there was no bread, so she basically told Audrey that, please, man, run over to the shops and get us some bread so that we have something with the tea. So while her sister was away, Rosemary put something into her tea. And when she got back, she handed the tea over to her and she started drinking it. It wasn't too long before her sister started feeling wheezy. And then this is where she decided to actually lock the house and leave immediately. Neighbors would later mention that when Rosemary was leaving, she literally did not acknowledge the neighbors anymore that were outside. She literally just got into the car and left. She came back a little bit later, and to her disappointment, her sister was still alive. And this is when she decided to take matters into her own hands, and she accelerated things by stifling her. Unfortunately, it was at this point that Audrey lost her life. Immediately after Audrey had passed away, Rosemary took her phone and then called her insurer. Now, it is believed that she was just checking up on things, but she pretended to be Audrey and reiterated that, if anything happens to me, please make sure that you pay out to my sister, Rosemary Ndlovu. Because insurance companies actually keep recordings of all phone calls, this specific phone call was played in court, and it was actually noted that this was very, very similar to Rosemary's voice. After she had done this, she then left Audrey's house. She made sure to lock and then she left. The following day, she pretended as if she could not get a hold of Audrey and then decided to go back to Audrey's house. But instead of going directly into this house, she then went to the neighbors. The same neighbors she actually did not acknowledge the second time she saw them the previous day. She went to them and basically said, have you guys seen Audrey? And the neighbors were very clear at saying, the last time we saw her, she was with you. She then went on to say, I've been trying to call her the whole morning. Please, man, come with me to go check for her in the house. The neighbors could not understand why she didn't go by herself, but she persuaded them and they eventually went. When neighbors explained later on, they said that even before they went in the house, Rosemary had started crying and calling out for her sister and literally had tears rolling down from her eyes saying, my sister, what happened to my sister? The women eventually got into the house and were shocked to see Audrey in the state that she was in. Unfortunately, it was too late. She had already lost her life and there was really nothing much that they could do for her. The police were called, and when the police arrived, they took over the scene. Now, while the police were busy with their duties, Nomia decided to start washing the 2 cups from the previous night. And when the police noticed this, they told her, no, stop it, don't do that. But unfortunately, she was already done. Unfortunately, this would be the end of Audrey. The case really didn't go anywhere. And a few weeks later, Rosemary did what she did best. She went to the insurers and started claiming. She claimed 717,000 rands, and this was the biggest payout yet. She was pretty chuffed about this and she started spending. Now, because the payout was pretty substantial, in 2014, for the first time since she started her escapades, she did not do anything. And unfortunately, as you would have imagined, 2015 came and the money was finished. And also, back at home, things were not going well with her boyfriend, Morris. They were going through a turbulent patch, mainly because of money and how Morris was constantly sending money back to his family. At this point, Rosemary was pregnant, but the relationship stayed tumultuous. Morris's brother, Justice, would later testify in court that Morris used to sleep in the car many nights back to back because of the state of the house. Rosemary eventually gave birth mid of 2015, and at this point, she had made a decision that her partner and father of her infant child would be next on the list. Now, on the first attempt, this was when she was still in hospital after giving birth to their baby. The plan was that she would call Morris and say that she doesn't like the nappies that the hospital is providing for their newborn, so he must please bring nappies. And then immediately after he got out of the house to try and come and bring the nappies, then the hired man would pounce on him and actually execute the hit. And true to the plan, Rosemary called Morris, and as she suspected, Morris was quickly out of the house to try and rush to the hospital to bring their newborn nappies. And when he got outside, he met a man who was holding a pistol. And luckily for him, it literally jammed and could not fire. And this is when he got away. Rosemary was gutted. She came back home a few days later with the baby, and in no time she started planning the second attempt. And this time the plan was that the house was going to be burnt with him inside. She put bottles with petrol underneath their bed, and when he was sleeping, she took the baby and started the fire, and they left. Unfortunately for her, he quickly noticed and he ran out of the house and the fire was put off. Sadly, Morris Mabasa's luck was slowly running out because less than a month later, he was found in an open field in Olifantsfontein with over 80 wounds to his body, and unfortunately, he had passed away. He still had his wallet with him, which still had his credit card and some money in it. So it became very obvious very quickly that this was not some sort of robbery. But unfortunately, just like the other cases, not much investigation was done, and that was just that with Morris Mabasa. It would later be revealed that Rosemary had 16 life insurance policies on Morris, the first one dating back as far back as 2011, the very first year they started dating. Rosemary got a total of 416,000 rands from these policies and an extra 100,000 rands from Morris's employer, the U.S. Embassy. Unfortunately, this money was just not enough for Rosemary. She had finished it in less than a year. Her colleagues at the police station would later state that Rosemary was extra generous when she was on the up and up, to the extent of which it was not uncommon for her to spend on lunches on everyone at the police station. It was probably because of these habits and, of course, the gambling that her money was drained away so quickly. And in January of 2016, just 4 months after Morris had passed away, she started making plans for her next paycheck. This time, her next victim would unknowingly bring herself to Rosemary Ndlovu. Zanele Mota was a mother of 3 and Rosemary Ndlovu's niece. She was unfortunately going through a rough patch and some financial difficulties and gave Rosemary a call. Now you must remember, they all looked up to Aunt Rosemary. She was seemingly making it in the city of gold, and she basically asked Rosemary if she could help her, and Rosemary agreed. She moved in with Rosemary in January of 2016, and almost immediately Rosemary signed her up to life insurance policies. She actually went as far as opening 3. She opened one in January, another one in March, and the last one in May. And as usual, she paid for the insurance policies religiously without missing any premiums. Rosemary liked to switch up how she took people's lives, and as a result, this time she planned that Zanele would be run over by a car. And like clockwork, the day assigned for this came, and while she was in Campton Park, she was indeed run over by a car. Luckily, she got assistance pretty quickly and was taken to hospital. When she got to hospital, the doctors attended to her instantly. Now, as much as she had some scars on her face and body, when they did x-rays, they noticed that the injuries were very superficial and nothing hectic had happened to her on the insides, which was great. So she was discharged on the very same day and sent home. Obviously, as you can imagine, Rosemary was not happy about this. It is believed that Rosemary took matters into her own hands that night, because the next day Rosemary took Zanele back to hospital, and this time when they looked at her, everything on the inside was damaged to the extent of which she passed away in hospital. The hospital did, however, make it a point to note that they were 100% sure that when she left the previous day, she was not like that, and something must have happened to her on the outside. However, they did not file anything with the police and they did not report anything. So unfortunately, that was that. With Zanele, she had lost her life and left her 3 little babies. And true to how she operated, Rosemary skipped all the way to the insurance company and cashed out 120,000 rands for Zanele's passing. So obviously, compared to all the other previous payouts, this wasn't much. So it was definitely not going to take her long before she started looking for her next victim. She then decided on Zanele's brother, William Mayeni Mashaba. She then called Mayeni and asked that they meet up in Davidton in Ekurhuleni. Now, unfortunately, after they met up, Mayeni would never be seen again alive. His body would later be discovered in Reed Flay. And similar to Morris, he still had his wallet. He still had money in his wallet, his ID, some cards, as well as his cell phone with him. So it was definitely not a robbery. Cell phone records would later show that Mayeni was actually at the same place at the same time with Rosemary when this incident happened. And yet again, no investigation was done here and Mayeni was laid to rest. And as usual, very soon, Rosemary ran to the insurer. For the very first time, the insurance actually denied the claim. Now, the reason for doing this was because while she was filling in the forms, she had listed herself as Mayeni's partner. And when she was prompted to produce proof, she couldn't, so they denied her claim. Rosemary was frustrated. And while all of this was going on, unfortunately, she lost her 2-year-old child, Makana Mabasa, but the police have actually not excluded her from the fact that she might have done this on purpose. As if things could not get any worse, the walls were actually closing in for Rosemary. Brilliant Mashego, who was actually Audrey's son, Rosemary's sister, who was her second victim, had stumbled into some information. He had found out that Rosemary had received $717,000 for his mother's death, and he wanted answers. He called Rosemary and let her know what he had found out, and Rosemary responded by inviting him to her house on the 22nd of January 2018. Brilliant agreed, probably assuming that this meeting would be about talking about the mother's payout and hopefully she still had some of the money and would be sharing it with him. But this would not be the case. Unfortunately, after the said meeting, no one would ever see Brilliant again alive because he would be found dumped in Bushbuck Ridge. Cell phone records showed that Rosemary and Brilliant were together in Tembisa and later moved together for 5 hours to Bushbuck Ridge, where the body was later found. But at the time of the actual incident, no investigation was done yet again. And as you would have guessed, Rosemary ran to the insurance company to claim again. And for the second time in a row, she was denied because again, during the paperwork, she had listed Brilliant as her own son, and when she was prompted to produce evidence, she couldn't. Rosemary's luck seemed to be running dry. So at this point, she needed someone who was very close to her, where she could easily prove relations, and this is where she chose her own mother. She hired someone who was meant to go to Bushbuck Ridge and actually take her mother's life. Now, when the said person, who was given 2,000 rands to complete the mission, arrived at Rosemary's house, he saw how frail Rosemary's mother was and just could not bring himself to complete it. And therefore, he just pretended like he wanted water and was just passing by. The mother gave him water and he left. You can just imagine how frustrated Rosemary was at this point. She had been denied numerous claims and now this man was not willing to complete the mission. So she decided to change the person and also change the victims. Instead of her mother, now the hit was supposed to go to her sister and her 5 children. She found someone else for the mission and was in discussions with this man. She went on to tell the man that she wanted her sister out and as well as the children. Now this person was shocked to find out this information. Now, as much as he was used to a life of crime, he just could not fathom why an aunt would want to take her nieces and her nephews, especially because the youngest one was 5 months old at the time. Thankfully, because of his conscience kicking in, he decided to go to the police and report Rosemary Ndlovu. Upon reporting, the police stated that they needed proof. After all, Rosemary was one of their own, so they really needed concrete proof before they could actually go into arresting. And that is when they devised a plan to do a sting operation. They were going to plant voice recorders and cameras into the hired man's car, and he had to lure Rosemary into talking about the whole situation. They also said that an undercover police officer would actually go with them in the car and he would just act like an accomplice. The man called Rosemary on the day of the mission. Rosemary had booked herself into a hospital and this was going to be her alibi. They went to the hospital to fetch her. She had requested a day pass because she had to drive with them 5 hours to her sister's house so that she could point at the house and then they would return later on to complete the mission. During the trip, the man lured her into speaking and this is what happened.
Marugwaza nokudubula ayikho emakhaya yabona ukushiza number 1 lokuhamba number 1 zona lezi umntwana umama noma yini umama Angithi uye nabantwana bakhe bayi-5. Bawu-5 labantwana. Nalo mama khona. Bancane abantwana bakhona, nomunye ngathi akakaqedi no-1 year. Nomunye ngathi 3 years. Nomunye 7 years. Umdala wakhona ngathi 14. Umdala. Mina bengicanga ukuthi sihambe manje. Bengicanga ukuthi sihambe manje, ne? Masihamba manje, ngiyohlangana naye, ngimbize sihlangane somewhere. Mina mhlambe ngibheke imoto laphana, yabona? Ngimnikezele la philisi Njabulo, yabona? Ngithi manje kuthi ngene sinomkhuhlane. Ngithi niwaphuze mani lala ngoba ayalalisana. Then mina ngizokhona ukungena. Akunamabhadla laphana. Uthi mali 29. Nafana noma angathola iphilisi masengelile. Thanks. Noma nginikwana iphilisi.
Kodwa kusamele ngithi siyenze ukuya ngeplan yabona.
Ngitholile esibhedlela. Siyayibona. Ngiclean mina ngaqala ngazo. Sebangitshela indaba mina kusasa ngiyavuka ngiyagijima ngiye ekhaya. Ngicela amalungiselelo ngiyaclaima ngiyenza zonke lezi zinto.
Uklema ngoba yintwaneni.
Next week, imali izotholakala next week. Asithi Friday.
So sipay Friday.
Next week.
Sidla kamnandi.
Kahle nje. Namba nosebenza kahle.
Awufanele ungithathele umsebenzi uhamba nawo.
Ngicela isibhamu mas ngasebenzisa. Manje ngasebenzisa lezo zinto. Esithola
uzoshuma la.
Nemali ngeke iphume. Angithi semakhaya azenziwa lezo zinto. Emakhaya mangazi ukuthi badubulile ibusinessman. So ukushisa.
Thereafter, they went to a fueling station. This is where they were supposed to buy petrol, which the men were meant to use in the evening. Now, Rosemary paid for the petrol, and that's when the police pounced and she was arrested on the scene. Naturally, Rosemary acted very shocked and denied everything. She was charged for attempting to take her sister and her children's life. And while they were digging up more evidence, they actually found out that the case was more sinister than they could have ever thought. In the year 2019, her trial commenced, and her mother just refused to believe that her daughter was capable of such, supported her, and even went as far as testifying in her favor during the trial. Rosemary was not done though. Even though she was behind bars and she was currently going through a trial, she then decided to try and do yet another hit, and this time on the investigating officer, in a bid to try and just destroy the case. Luckily, it was unsuccessful, and in the year 2021, she was sentenced to 6 concurrent life sentences and 10 years for fraud. As of 2023, she is currently back in court for her new charges having to do with the investigating officer. Whether or not she wins the case, chances are she would be spending the rest of her life in prison. And with that said, we have come to the end of the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.